Hello, I'm Herm Gailey. We're here to do a video on what I've heard referred to as centering your horse. Basically, what I'll do with her shortly is I'll start to move her around my pen here, which is about 120 by 240. Probably start her out at a trot because this is fairly meaningless at the walk. And while you can transition to the lope, the trot's probably your best working gait and certainly the best gait to do when you're just starting out for the day. This mare hasn't been warmed up. This exercise is a nice warm-up for a horse. It works best on a horse that's either fresh or has some forward motion. A horse that's lacking forward drive and wiggles is not going to be helped by this as much as the up and down the center and guide steering to straight video that we also have done, showing the process of getting a horse going straight and forward. But to take the lean out of your horse, this is real useful. I first encountered this back in the early 2000s at a clinic with a gentleman named Joe Walter. If you ever have the opportunity to take a clinic from Joe Walter, fine horseman, great teacher, and no finer gentleman ever walked the earth. I hope he's doing well. And I hope he's still doing clinics because he has an awful lot to offer. And he basically said, give your horse their head, find out what they're trying to do, and then do the opposite. So if you're trotting along there and they lean to the left, steer them to the right, and vice versa. If your horse is running off, then you do what you need to do to keep this from turning into a wreck. But if you can just sort of keep them on a trot and then later on a lope, you'll get a horse hunting in the middle of the bridle reins. Another resource that would explain this is a series of videos by Warwick Schiller, who's pretty prominent on YouTube and on the internet, real good horseman. He calls it the left-right exercise, which is kind of self-explanatory. And he's taken this to a much more detailed level than Joe did, who was just explaining it in the course of a clinic. So using those two things, I've really made this a part of my program, and I'll show you what I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to point this mare somewhere, almost anywhere. And I'm going to pick up a trot. Now those cones have nothing to do with what we're doing here. So which way is she trying to go? Well, it's pretty clear she's going to the left. I'm going to steer her to the right. Still wanting to veer to the left, I'm going to oversteer her just a little bit to the right. And I'm going to correct some of that with a little more motion. Now she's falling a little bit to the right because she anticipates I'm going to go down that long line. I take her to the left. She's going perfectly straight. In this instance, I'm going to let her stop here. You could also pick a direction once she committed to go someplace she shouldn't have up here. One of the handicaps of this riding area that I have is by choice, I don't have sides on it. And if you see a fence over there, that's probably distorted a bit by our lens. That is not right along the edge of the pen. That's about maybe 50 feet past the pen. See, this mare is going a little bit to the left, coming toward the camera. Correct that back to straight. Going back to it, so I'm going to correct her beyond straight. What I'm not doing, and here she's going a little bit to the left, which is handy because I have to go somewhere because I'm running out of pen, so I take her to the right. She's going to the left again. I'm going to overcorrect to the right. What you don't do is you don't hold your horse in the bridle. What you don't do is hold them on a line. You give them the chance to do what she's doing here, which is going to the right, so you can take the opportunity to steer her to the left and get her centered between your reins. Here she's pretty good, but she's starting as she approaches that fence to think we're going to go on around and down the long side, so I steer her back to the right. One of the things this will do is we humans tend to get into a pattern. So we'll go around the rail and the horse gets to just following the rail and not thinking. See, she's going to the left And there's a little bit of a magnet over there in the form of our barn. She's not real bad about that, but I can feel it at least subtly. Here she's lined out, but looking back to the left. So I take her to the right. So she's going nice and straight here. And here I take advantage of not having sides on my pen. And I just leave it. And her reward for going straight is she's going to get to stand here for a minute and look at these two yearlings. So back in we come at a trot. She seems straight, but she's thinking right. Sometimes it can be felt before it can be seen, but I bet you could see that or sense it watching the video. She's going a little bit to the left, but she corrected herself, and that's something they'll start to do. She's pretty good and straight here. Got a little bit of a left trend. I let her commit to the mistake, and then I steer her back right, and I'll sort of complete that loop there so that I can keep trotting. So I'm coming down this line here straight. She's coming right toward the camera to the left. I'm going to steer her off pretty strongly to the right. The other thing you're not doing is influencing your horse with your legs except to make them go forward. When you correct them, you can use your leg, but don't hold them or steer them with your leg. Coming back toward the camera, didn't ask for that, steer her to the left. Now this is dull and boring stuff, and I've promised that a lot of what we do is going to be dull and boring, because that's where a lot of good training takes place, is doing these tedious things. See, she's going back this way, so I'm going to double her right back on the fence so that she doesn't automatically think that she's going to go down that line. Now see, here she just sort of came over to this corner, and I'm going to let her stand here for a minute and say, you were straight, you didn't head for that long straight line down toward the barn, so I'm going to reward you by letting you stand here for a minute. And then as you get this maybe a little more perfect, you can move into a lope, but I want to see what happens up here. Is she going to go off to the left as she did the last time? Not so bad. Not so bad. So instead of going down that line, if anything, she trended a little bit over to the fence, and I put up with that because she was trying to correct, I think, and maybe just overcorrected. So now I'm going to see if I can make a nice straight diagonal, and that's pretty true. She moved a little to keep from hitting that cone, and she moved a little too much, so I'm going to steer her to the right, going to the left, steer her to the right. Give them just enough time to commit to the mistake. So I'm going to pick up a right lead lope, and I'm going to let her take a long, low frame and give her lots of line. This will take gallop out of them too if they're a little bit fresh. See, she's sort of wanting to run off. I'm going to put up with that for a while. See, she's going to the left or to the right. I'm just going to steer her around to the left. Now here's the bonus. You can do this on a green horse and put the rudiments of a counter canter on them at a very early stage. But you want to start with it easy. And that was pretty darn good there. I'll take that. You want to start with it easy at a trot and make sure you get that right. And then when you get into the lope component, you're not going to have to be fixing things. See, she's going to the right, steer her to the left. And she may show us something here. When they're going nice and straight and free, a lot of times when you ask them to stop, they'll stop pretty nice. Whoa. Well, she wasn't looking to stop that time, but I can't really fault her. She certainly wasn't belligerent about it. Now that was the right lead. And we're going to do this again to the left. But she was nice and straight and true, so she gets to stand here and blow a little bit. So instead of wrestling with your horse, instead of getting into a circle and trying to hold him on a circle and steer him back into a circle and get into an argument with him, be a little less quarrelsome. Come out here, give him some space to make a mistake, and then have a conversation about that. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will only work one direction just to keep the video a little shorter. But I think probably it's useful to do this particular exercise both ways on camera because they're always a little different from lead to lead. So the goal here to the left is no different though. We're going around trying to keep her going in straight lines. That's nice and straight. In fact, I'm going to let her come right up here and stop. And I do that stop judiciously. When they do something pretty nice, rather than steer them away when they're doing nothing wrong, I'll let them stop and take a little rest. Drop those reins down, see where she's headed. She's headed to the left, steer her back to the right. Stayed a little too far to the right, gonna steer her around here to the left. I'm going to steer her just to get a new line, come up center, not quite the center, and she's going off to the right. I'm going to steer her to the left. But you can see I'm letting my reins real long, giving her plenty of time to make the mistake. I'm just going to get her on a straight line here. She's going a little bit to the right this time. Steer her to the left. Steer her around here to the right. This will be your right counter canter. She's on the left lead, right circle. Come up the middle. She's wiggling. Wiggling more. Take her back to center. Take her back to center. She was leaning to the right up there, so I went to the left. Now I'm going to surprise her. Now some horses will break, some horses will change leads. So I just chose to take her that direction. Going a little bit that way, but not as much as she was. So I'm going to steer her back to the left. That's pretty good. So you can see the idea here. And you can see why this is a decent warm-up. Get your horse long, low, and loose. And straight. All good things. Whoa. And she was a little more interested in stopping that time. Let her stand here and breathe. And that is centering your horse. Useful thing. And the nice thing is it's pretty much totally harmless. You're not going to do any harm doing this. Just don't do it on a horse that's completely out of control, that's running off, or that won't go forward. But if you got some forward motion, this is your opportunity to shape it, make it straight and true. So, hope that's useful to you. Look forward to hearing from you about what you think of it. Until next time, ride well, do well, and be well.